Do you think it was hard to be heard in a big family like that? When you had something to say, it was pretty hard to be heard. And maybe that's why I like writing so much, because writing, I think, is the best way to be heard. You write your thoughts down on paper, somebody else reads them and really can hear what you're saying. So when you read my books, you know a lot about what's important to me, and the things that I write about are things that I care about. This is my 5th grade picture. What do you think? Who's laughing? You think that's a funny picture? You don't all want to have glasses just like that? No? When I was in 5th grade, I really liked school. And though I got pretty good grades, I wasn't a great reader. There were a lot of books that I would pick up that I would have some trouble finishing. Part of it was that I would get bored. I would read the first few pages or the first chapter, or get midway through the book and I would want to go back outside and play. Because I learned the outdoors was a great place to have adventure, and I had an instant ice hockey team with all those brothers I had, an instant gang to play tag in the swamp when it was frozen. And so I really learned to love the outdoors. The kind of books that held my attention were fast-paced stories, the kind that would keep your attention, like Nancy Drew or Hardy Boys. But my all-time favorite kids' book, children's book, was Charlotte's Web by E.B. White. How many of you know that story? Great. I'm glad to see that you all know that story still. My favorite picture book for kids, I don't know, does anybody here know that picture book, Harry the Dirty Dog? I love that book. So there are still books that are favorites that I read as a kid. Well, anyway, I wanted to write books for kids. When I decided to write for kids, the kind of books that I would have loved to have read as a kid. And so I tried to write fast-paced stories. Not until I was in high school did I even have an idea that I would want to be a writer when I grew up. And so I thought, words are really powerful. It's a great way to get down on paper what's in your head and your heart, and you put it in words and somebody else can understand what you're saying. And at that point, I then decided to go to college and got a degree in English and then worked on becoming a writer after that. Well, I live up in northern Minnesota, right way up on the border, way in that yellow spot on the top of our state. And it's marked yellow on this map because it's the cold spot of the country. I live near International Falls, which is called the ice box of the nation. It's very cold. In the middle of winter, it's so cold that the nostril hairs freeze inside your nose when you step outside. And some time ago, my husband and I heard someone or something rattling at the front door of our house, and I thought, oh no, crime can happen anywhere. Maybe somebody's trying to break into our house. I nudged my husband to get out of bed. He rose to his full 5-6 inches in height, and in his boxers he went down to the front door, bravely flung open the door, and there on the front doorstep was a massive black bear. So my husband screamed. Then the bear ran off. My husband picked up a piece of gravel to fling at the bear's rump. Instead of running away, the bear got on its hind legs and began to snort and growl and came back towards the door. So we quickly closed the door and let the bear go back to what it was doing, which was simply licking the sucker off the top step that our kids had left there. Well, there's one of my neighbors. We also have otters that like to pop up out of the ice holes in front of our house, and they slide across the ice and maybe go down an ice hole. One of my books has otters in it, and I wonder if any 3rd graders here might have read it, or possibly 2nd graders. It has just a paragraph where an otter pops out of an ice hole. Does anybody know? Do you know? Very good, wolf shadows. So everything that's around me finds its way into what I write, and it's the same with your lives. Your lives have all kinds of material to use for stories. We have a family of nesting eagles that lives near my house, so I watch eagles fly by very frequently. And one day, I was watching a parent eagle with an eaglet high in the top branches of a pine tree, and this eaglet would fly out. It was a very windy day, and it would fly out, and it would screech and complain, and then fly back to the top of the tree. And I thought, maybe this eaglet was learning how to fly in a high wind, and maybe it didn't like the process. And then I thought, maybe writing and flying have something in common. Does anybody else here freeze up with some fear when you look at a blank sheet of paper and you're asked to write something? Does anybody go, I don't know what I'm going to write, or all my ideas are stupid probably, I'm just really stuck? See, look around, you're not alone. That's a normal part of the writing process. I think all of us feel a little bit of fear sometime when we're supposed to create something out of nothing and we don't know what to do. Well, just know that even I struggle with that at times. When I'm going to write a new book, I don't know if it's going to be any good. I don't know if you're going to like my books or if my editor will like my books, but I figure all I can do is try. So I have to push fear over my shoulder and ignore it and just start writing, whether it's one sentence or one paragraph, just get started. And so maybe when you feel fearful and stuck, how would you say the hunter in French? Do you know? Le chasseur? Something like that. I'm not pronouncing it very well. But that's the French version. There's a part in this book that you all probably know that have heard it, and it says, the hunter's arrow flew, whoosh. In French it goes, the hunter's arrow flew, fui. Oh, good question. Did I draw my own covers? All of the jackets of my books are illustrated by a different artist. And I'll tell you a story about this one. For the cover of Riot, you can't see it, you're probably too far away, but in the corner on Riot it says E-R-I-C, Eric, in red. When this book came out, my son was in 5th grade, and my son's name is Eric. And I went to his school to do a school visit. And all these teachers, parents, kids stopped me and kept saying, your son is such a good artist, it's really amazing. I said, he is? And they said, yeah, he did the jacket for Riot. He did the cover for that book. And finally, when I did my presentation, I had to stop the rumors and show them that to find out who does the illustration on a book, you look to the back jacket flap. And in this case, it said cover illustration by Eric Velasquez, not Eric Casanova. But he had a good joke going for a while. So that's how you find out who did the jackets. All right, I know some of you have questions. Hang on to your questions. I'll stop again for more later, but I want to keep going with my slideshow. Has anybody here read Riot, all or part of it? Okay, some of you have. Well, writing the book Riot is the scariest and bravest thing I've ever done because it was about some things that have been happening in the town I live near, International Falls. And when I decided to write about this, I had some people who said to me, Mary, if you write this book, you should know there's a lot of talk around town, and people aren't going to go to your husband's business, and people are saying they'll vote with their wallets. And so I had to really make a decision. Is this a book I needed to write or not? Well, I decided to write it and tell a story as fairly as I could about what had happened in our town back in 1989. I woke up on the morning of September 9th, 1989, and a friend called me from Canada and said, Mary, what's going on over there? There's a mushroom cloud of smoke above your town. Is the whole town on fire or what? We turned on the radio and the mayor said, don't go into town today. There's a mob, hundreds of men strong, about 600 men, roaming through the streets of International Falls. Stay home and stay safe. Typical morning for all of you? Probably not. It was very scary because we didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know what kind of violence might take place or if people would get killed. I knew as a writer that day I would write about this because my way of dealing with what I don't understand is to write about it. And I didn't know if I could write about it for kids. Well, here, what happened is people were fighting over jobs, new jobs in my lap. Like Seth, I just went with that name and thought I'd like that name, and it was short and not a really common name, so I thought I'd go with that. But Libby in Stealing Thunder, her name had been Abby, it had been Whitney, and I changed her name after I'd written the whole book and changed it to Libby. So I kind of go by whatever feels right to me, and that's how I finally settled on the name. Yes, right here. What got me into writing, I think that need to have a voice coming from a big family, needing to be heard in a way, but mostly I love creating something out of nothing. One thing I do when I've got some free time, which isn't very often these days, is I like to throw a pot on a wheel. I had thought once maybe I would be a potter. You have people who love wolves, and you have people who hate wolves, seeing them only as predators. If I had lost a pet dog off of a chain to wolves, or if I had lost livestock, sheep or cattle to wolves, I might not feel so fondly towards them. But that hasn't been my experience. My experience is to go cross-country skiing and to see wolf tracks or wolf scat, evidence that wolves are nearby. One day in particular, though, influenced me to write Wolf Shadows. I was up cross-country skiing, and it was this beautiful snow-sparkly day with an eagle's nest here and a beaver's lodge there. I came around a bend and stopped abruptly because there in front of me was a wide swath of blood in the snow with deer tracks and wolf tracks everywhere. tawny deer hair scattered across the snow, and only a foot-long piece of a deer leg bone and a hoof remained. This was an awful and a wonderful moment, and awful because it was an ugly sight, but wonderful to know that wolves truly were right there in the very woods that I ski in. Now, as I skied on, I had to remind myself, Mary, wolves don't attack people, they don't attack people, because I could feel that instinctive shiver of fear up my spine. So, where does this show up? Of course, wolf shadows in the first chapter. Let's see, I'm going to keep here, southern Minnesota, along the Mississippi River in apple orchard country. As a writer, because I try to use those five senses, it meant that I needed to go to an apple orchard area and use my five senses as I researched it. I went to that area and hiked and biked and camped with my son Eric, who was a sixth grader at the time, and took in as much as I could so that I could write a story that you might believe.
So I put to James an avid reader. Do you have a favorite book out there? Like me, is it hard to say which is a favorite?
Well, I haven't even finished this one.
So maybe this will be your favorite. That'd be good. It's nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Keep reading and have a good time. Nice to meet you. Have a great summer. Do you live on the farm?